Okay, here we are on page 2 of lines. And we're going to talk about how to find slope. And this time we're going to actually find out how to do it easily using the calculator. So I will go briefly through the algebraic method for finding slope. If you're comfortable doing that, then by all means, go ahead and do that. Remember that the formula to find slope or gradient, sometimes it's called gradient in our book, is m equals the differences in the y's divided by the difference in the x's of the 2 points that are given to you. Okay? When you do these subtractions and divisions, you make sure that you name one of the points x1, y1 and the other point x2, y2 so that you can be consistent in the order that you subtract them. Okay? If you're not consistent in the order that you subtract them, you might get a positive slope when you should have gotten a negative, and vice versa. Now, by the looks of the slope, the looks of the line, you should be able to predict whether you get a positive or a negative slope because, for example, if we think that this line is showing the trend of the economy of Brazil, we can see that the economy is getting worse, and we can look at this line here, we can see that the economy is getting better because the line goes up. Here the line goes down. That also corresponds to the intuition as to whether the slope is positive or negative, because when the economy is going down, it's a negative slope. When the economy is going up, it's a positive slope. Okay? All right. So let's use the calculator to find some of these slopes, and you can see how this works. 2 important notes here is when you have a flat slope or no slope at all, that is a 0 slope or a 0 gradient. In our book, they call it gradient. Undefined gradient is when the line is completely vertical. And when you have a vertical line, the slope is actually infinite. Okay? They say it's undefined. Okay. And that's a case where the calculator is going to give you an error if you try to figure it out. So we need to be aware of what that means. Okay. All right. So let's look at number 1. Find in each case the set of possible coordinates of point A, which lies on a horizontal line passing through -4, -8, and a vertical line which passes through -3, 7. What are they talking about? Okay. Find the set of possible coordinates of point A, which lie on a horizontal line passing through -4, -8. In these cases, I suggest drawing it because then it'll make more sense. So there's B, which is -4, -8. If I were to draw a horizontal line going through B, it would look like that, right? Now, what are the set of possible coordinates of point A which lie on this line? So it could be this point, it could be this point, it could be this point, it could be this point. The common thing about all these points is what? The x-coordinate or the y-coordinate? The x-coordinate is constantly changing because I just put them in many x positions, but the y-coordinate is always -8, isn't it? So I could say that the set of all possible coordinates of this point would be k, comma, -8, because -8 is always constant, and k is an element of the real numbers. Okay? You don't need to be familiar with that notation, but that's a real compact math way of doing it. If you were going to write it out without knowing this notation, you could say something like, oh, well, the y-coordinate is always -8, and the x-coordinate can be anything. Okay? What about B? A vertical line passing through -3, 7. So I advise you first to write draw the point -3, 7. And then we're going to draw a vertical line that goes through it, so it looks kind of like that. So what are the possible coordinates that is a terrible line. Let me try to draw. Okay. So what are the possible points here? Well, it could be this point, 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 it could be this point. The common thing here is they have the same x-coordinate or the y-coordinate. Well, the y-coordinate can be anything because I'm going up and down here. The x-coordinate always appears to be -3. So I would write -3, k, where k is any real number. Okay, so that would be the nice mathematical expression for writing it, but you could just describe it. You could say the x-coordinate is -3 and the y-coordinate can be anything. Okay? Number 2, find the gradients or slopes of the lines passing through the following pairs of points. Now is when we can effectively use the calculator to do the heavy lifting. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to get into stat edit, because the way we find slopes is we just run linreg, which you already have learned how to do. So we just take these 2 points as if they were points which we're going to use to find a linreg equation, and then we're just going to read the slope off the linreg equation. So you're like, well, I already knew how to do that. You're not teaching me anything new. So this is just like to realize that you already have a tool which easily figures out the slopes between 2 points, and really this is a trivially easy problem with the calculator. So I got 2, 3 and -1, 4. The only trick is making sure that you type them in the proper positions here. You don't have to put them in, like I could put 2, 3 below -1, 4, but I need to put 2 on the left and 3 on the right so I can keep straight which is x and which is y, right? Then I do stat calc linreg, which is number 4, and then I'm going to check the output. Oh, L1, L2 is what I want there, and I'm going to press calculate. And I'm just going to read off the result here. The result is ax plus b, and the a value is -0.333. So which is the slope? The slope is the number that is being multiplied times x, so it's -0.333 is the slope. 3 significant figures would be -0.333. Now if I want to do another one, it's just a simple matter of filling in my new values into stat edit, and if I wanted to clear out my old values, I can just go to the top and press clear on top of L1 and L2, and that'll clear it out. Make sure you don't press delete, because if you press delete, it deletes the entire list, so there's no more L1 and L2. That's kind of awkward. If you happen to do that, the only way I know of getting the list 1 and list 2 back is to reset the calculator, do a RAM reset. Okay, so now I'm going to put -11.2 for my first row. -11.2. And then for my second row, I'm going to put 2, 7. And then I'm going to do stat calc linreg. Linreg is option 4. And L1 and L2 is what I want. Calculate. And in this case, I'm going to look for the a value, not the b value. The b value is the y-intercept. So I'm looking at the a value. My a value is 0.385. Positive 0.385, right? Okay. Be careful, because that first time we saw that the slope was -0.333, right? Okay. Last one. This one's a little bit tricky because the points are not nice integers. Okay. So I'm going to clear out the L1 and L2 again. If I clear out the L1 and L2, I can type in -1.322 for the first one, -1.3, 2.2, and then for my second pair of points, I have 1 1/5 and -0.3. How do I type 1 1/5 in the calculator? Well, that's a good question. I go to Math, Number. I could go to fraction too. Let's go to fraction because there's less to choose from. I'll put in U and D, which is a mixed number. So I can type it in as a mixed number. So I'm going to type in 1 1/5. So I put 1 1/5. So I put 1, then I go over here, and then I press 1 again, and then I go down here and I press 5. 1 1/5. So I typed in 1 1/5 just as it was. Now I'm going to put -0.3. So remember, negative sign, use this one and not the subtraction sign. Okay? All right, now we're going to do stat calc and reg again. Go down to calculate. And our slope value is -1. All these messy numbers, and the slope is a nice -1, isn't it? Okay, and let's go down to number 5. Find the gradient of the line passing through these 2 points and passing through these 2 points. Okay, so let's do this one first. The gradient of the line passing through -1, -1, and 3, 2. Stat, edit. And after I do these, I'll do one of these the hard way, just so that you have that experience. Okay, clear. Okay, so I'm going to put -1, -1 in first. -1, -1. And the next row should be 3, 2, right? Okay, and then I do stat, calc, and reg. Option 4. Even though this might seem kind of repetitive to do this, I'm only asking you to do it like, 5 or 6 times. And that's so that you don't have to study this ever again. Because if you do this 5 or 6 times right now, then it'll tide you over to the next time, right? So the slope here is 0.75. Now, if I was to do this the hard way, I would need to look at my x values, which I'm going to highlight in red, and my y values, which I'm going to highlight in blue, and I need to do the subtraction according to this formula, right? So let's say that this is my second point and this is my first point. So first I'm going to do the second point y minus the first point y divided by the second point x minus the first point x. And so it's 2 minus a -1, which is 2 plus 1, which is 3. And it's 3 minus -1, which is 3 plus 1, which is 4. And I get 3/4, which is 0.75. So you can see that even if you do it the hard way, you'll get the same answer. A little easier to make a mistake, right? Because you're doing all these. You got to remember to put the y's on top. You got to remember to always put the y, the second point first and the first point second, or vice versa, but you need to be consistent between the top and the bottom. So there's a lot of little ways to make a mistake on this. Whereas using the calculator, it's really hard to make a mistake, right? Because we basically input the data in a way that we're very familiar with. We've been doing this for 6 months now, the same way in stat edit. So it's really hard to make a mistake here. 0, 2.5 is the first point. And the second point, I wrote 25 instead of 2.5. 2.5. That's pretty much the only way you can make a mistake. I made a mistake again. 2.5. It's harder to make a mistake on the real calculator than on the fake calculator. The virtual calculator, it's easier for the thing to miss a button, click. -1/3, so I put -1 divided by 3. And that already calculates it, and I put 5 for the y value. All right, and then I do stat calc, option 4, and then L1, L2, of course. Go down to calculate, press enter, and my slope is -7.5. Okay? It's really easy, right? And by the time you do these 5 problems, you've pretty much memorized everything you need to memorize.